Okay, folks, I'm showing 102 on my clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Be respectful of everybody's time. We'll probably have a few people logging in here as we kind of get things moving. But first of all, welcome. I'm sure that I know most of you on this call. My name is John Elsesser. I'm Executive Director at the Indiana Non-Public Education Association, and we are very happy to host with our partners at IDOE another EANS webinar. And so last time we talked a little bit more about allowable uses. This time I think we'll be focusing more on the application process. And very happy to have with us our two very good friends from IDOE, Cole Dietrich, who's the Director of Title Grants and Support, and Andrew Mazer, who is our State Ombudsman and who's also a Title Grant Specialist. If everybody's not a Zoom guru by now, you never will be, but just a few Zoom logistics. We're asking everybody to please, because we have a couple hundred people maybe, or at least 150 people will be on this call. So if you would keep your microphones muted, and just to keep the clutter down on the screen, we're also asking folks to keep their cameras off as well. We do encourage you to use the chat function for any questions that you have. And I know Andrew and Cole and Heidi will be monitoring that. I neglected to introduce my partner here at IMPEA, Heidi Gant, who's our Director of Communications and Membership Relations, and she's doing all things Zoom behind the scenes. So she'll keep us in line, keep things moving, and also probably help with the chat function as well. We will be recording this, and if you are registered, will be receiving a recording of this and any PowerPoint slides that are used today. So welcome as we continue to work through this emergency assistance for non-public schools. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Cole Dietrich from the Department of Education.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Heidi. And thank you, everybody, for letting us join you today. My name is Cole Dietrich. Like John mentioned, I'm the Director of Title Grants and Support here at the Department of Education, and our newest project is EANS. So first off, I want to thank Andrew Mazer for all of his work on this. My time is split amongst a number of other projects, and Andrew's is as well. But in addition to his normal day job of equitable services, he's really leaned into EANS, so I just want to thank him for helping make this a reality, because we have been, and then I want to thank you all as well for the grace and some patience as well, as we have been literally building the airplane and flying it with a very short runway. So I want to thank you to everybody for giving us that space to fight a little bit of the bureaucratic red tape to see what we can do to help out kids and help out schools the best. So with that, I will go ahead and start sharing my screen in our presentation. All right. Can someone either turn on their camera or confirm you can see my screen with the presentation? Perfect. Thanks, Heidi. Because John, even though I've been doing Zoom for it's been over a year now, I still will always manage to mess up if it's possible. So really quickly, this will be roughly the team that will be working on EANS with you all. We're pulling in some team members from both the Title IV and charter school program, as well as Alma, Flores Carlos, who will be helping us with some of the vendor registration pieces. So this is sort of a team of all the Swiss Army knives on the team who will be able to assist you with EANS. They'll be bringing in some knowledge and background that they have on their other federal grants in to support you all on some of the innovative uses we can do with EANS. So real quick, going over our agenda, we'll touch on the allowable uses in case you weren't able to attend the first webinar on allowable uses specifically for EANS. We will touch on that again. We will go through, and I'll actually do a mock-up registration today for our application, and then also do an application walkthrough with you. The application is up currently in a preview setting. please note if you're in there and you're messing around with it, playing around to see what you can expect once the application is actually open, nothing that you put into the system in preview will actually save. So please make sure that it's just for informational purposes and that you're not actually investing a large amount of time and effort into the preview portion of the app. We will also show you the vendor application. That way you likely have partners that you've identified that you want to carry out this work with them. And so we would like to make sure that you have the opportunity to say, this is where you can go to sign up to be a vendor for the EANS program. We'll have a few boxes to check that we'll go over with you. And then they'll be able to partner with us in the EANS program. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A as we go through. I know some people may type in the chat. Andrew will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions while I'm speaking, you don't want to forget about it, please do feel free to type that into the chat box. So touching on allowable uses. So again, we could spend hours and hours on each individual use you all are thinking through. Andrew has spent hours and hours on many individual requests. I think our greatest point here and our greatest impact for you all is to build the scaffolding to give you all the tools in order to help decide whether something would be allowable or not. And sort of pre-screen, that way that will cut down on the reviews and back and forth of your application and get you able to spend money and start implementing activities sooner rather than later. So some three big highlighted points for you here. When thinking, is this going to be allowable? Think temporary rather than permanent. We'll touch on that here in a little bit. Think about repairing things rather than construction. So for non-public schools, any sort of renovation to your buildings, anything permanent or structural or capital asset based is not going to be allowed because we have to maintain public control over that. And there's no way to maintain public control over like a wall in your building, for instance. And then the third point is to focus on pandemic related rather than day-to-day operations. So what extra expenses did you have or will you have either in responding to COVID or moving forward? Then that is what you'll want to focus your EANS on. If it's operational and just sort of getting by for day to day, that is not an appropriate use for the EANS funding, as this is an emergency assistance fund for non-public schools. So some specific questions that we've gotten, some FAQs, replacing your HVAC or boilers. It's not removable, it's not portable, and it can't be removed from your school should the need arise. So that would not be allowed. The same for buses or vans. If you were to build a new gym or auditorium, that would be a capital asset and essentially increasing the value of your property, which would not be allowable as there's no public control over the gym, for instance. Installing bells, systems, or carpets, we would consider those largely operational unless there was a close tie to how this would improve your ability to respond to COVID or to meet the needs of students moving forward. Similar to work you may have done with your equitable share with your public school district, we will not be able to pay staff or salaries of non-public schools with EANS funding. So that means everything, if you do need staffing or additional, people, boots on the ground, it will need to be through a third-party vendor, similar to what is done within a local education agency or a school district in terms of hiring like a tutor at your school district or at your school, excuse me. We've had a lot of interest in touchless faucets, touchless water bottle refilling stations or water fountains. Anything that would need to be plumbed in essentially is considered permanent fixture and is not allowed. So again, when we're thinking about the HVAC system, no permanent HVAC system, but if you had a portable air purifier or air purification system that can be removed and does not involve any structural changes to implement that, then that would be allowable. Again, the touchless water bottle filling stations would not, as those cannot be removed and they're not portable. This is an update, the very last one. EANS explicitly allows for cleaning supplies. Our thinking at the department was that this would also apply to services for the cleaning. However, the U.S. Department of Education has determined that cleaning services are not allowable, but cleaning supplies are. So I'll say that again. Cleaning services are not allowable, but cleaning supplies are. So that could translate into you have a contract with a cleaning supply or cleaning company, and we would only be able to support the cleaning supplies portion of any costs with EANS. The actual cleaning service would need to be covered through other means. I will make zero promises here, but I have pushed back to U.S. Department of Ed to say that I think it should include cleaning services as maximum flexibility for you all. However, I am not empowered to make that decision unilaterally. So please, for now, the guidance is what the guidance is, and that is that there will not be any contracted cleaning services allowed, only supplies. I just wanted to give one word because I know there's been some concern around, Cole, you've mentioned public control a number of times over these devices. I know the EANS FAQ and guidance mentions, if at the end of the EANS program where these funds are, where these devices and properties to go, we will have firmer guidance on that. Essentially, what we do with it after the end is not as big of a concern as just having the public control over the devices. So similar to when you purchase Chromebooks through Equitable Services, those belong to the school district or the public agent rather than to the non-public school. So we just have to maintain that. At the end of the EANS program, we have every intention of making sure that you can keep and retain any property, especially that is needed to continue the similar sort of services or activities that you implemented through the EANS program. So we've had to build the first part of the plane first. The closeout of the EANS program will come. However, Andrew and I are working on ways to make sure that we give you maximum flexibility. Frankly, my office is not big enough to store a couple hundred or 1,000 laptops. So we would like to make sure that that continues to be used to benefit your students. And just some overall thoughts as you are working on, is this allowable? Is this something I can include in my EANS? Think over the quality over your quantity. So think about what is reasonable for your school needs. I'd rather, if you have 100 students, just because you have the money for 500 iPads does not mean necessarily that that's a reasonable use of EANS. If you have 100 students, you should have around 100 devices or include a little extra for maintenance, etc., just to make sure you're keeping things reasonable in their scope. Andrew, is there anything you'd like to add? A lot of these were your notes that you've seen in questions. So I know you've been the front line on the questions. Is there anything you'd like to add to the notes over on the side?
No, I would just say thank you guys for sending in the questions. Also checking all of the resources that are available to you. We kind of tried to highlight all of the areas that I keep getting repeat questions on. The EANS website is going to be a great resource for you. I'm updating that daily with information, just ways to rethink and think of things. I would also suggest talking to your counterparts across the state and having those conversations before reaching out sometimes, because as you can see in the chat, I'm kind of linking everything to an allowable use, which is listed on the website to kind of give you the guidance. If it gets nitty gritty, just for example, Scott asked about what cleaning services are not allowable. Can we hire a third-party vendor to be used to hire an additional janitor? I said, oh, please reach out to me via email. I want to discuss this more because at first that seems allowable. We do want to work around things unless Cole has an exact answer right now. But just keep it up and always think of those three things highlighted: temporary, repair, and pandemic related, and then always quality over quantity. Meaning if you are a school of 100 students, don't put in a request for 500 Chromebooks. If you're a school of 75, don't put in a request for, let's say, 500 iPad Pros. So just really think about it and take your time. I also am going to just suggest and really enforce to take your time when you're planning this out. I know we're all kind of going quick. We're wanting to get this in and out of the door, but also just take your time, think about it, have conversations, and maybe sleep on it before you ask it or if you apply for it. That's all I want to put out there. So thank you guys. Back to you, Cole.
All right. So we're going to start getting into the actual meat of the presentation here. So we'll go over our registration for the application. Just to make sure that everything, double check all of your information. Your application information is going to drive your registration for the Class Wallet platform. So please make sure that your email is correct, name, address, etc. So just a rough timeline of the application and to set some expectations here. So we're going, again, we made the application available on March 26th to have people preview and start registering for accounts in order to get into the application. The application will actually go live on April 5th. So that allows time not just for you to get in and experience the application, but also for Andrew and I to see if any bugs come up in the first week or so of the application. Lets us play around with it as well. So April 5th, the application will be live and you'll be able to start submitting on Monday. IDOE then has 30 days to approve your application or provide feedback for, I would say, the majority of applicants. Typically, there is at least some feedback from the Department of Education. Perhaps this activity isn't allowable, or we'll need additional information on this to make sure it's allowable. So please do expect follow-up from the department team. It is not something that is indicative of there being a problem necessarily, just we have to make sure all of our boxes are checked and all of the red tape has been applied in all the right places to make sure that keeps us out of grant jail. So do expect feedback. The department has 30 days to provide approval. And we have a proposed deadline here of May 17th. For all final applications to be in. So again, May 17th is the hard deadline to make sure we have all of our applications for new activities or reimbursements in. So from here, once you have your application in, what would happen? We are working on some last minute procurement pieces just in terms of the contract for our vendor marketplace, which will be Class Wallet. So we have had approval for that. And so the application information that you provide will be uploaded into the Class Wallet system, which will then open up application or your accounts for you and would then allow you to start requesting services and activities. All of that will be forthcoming. Like I said, we're waiting on some of the contract details to be finalized, and then we'll be able to have a launch meeting with Class Wallet for you all. So TBD, stay tuned. Now, the actual application it's fairly straightforward, and we've tried to make sure that it is maybe not quick and painless, but in terms of federal grants, as quick and painless as possible to make sure that this is not an onerous process for you all, to make sure we can get the funds to helping students as soon as possible. So some of the basics, you'll have your non-public school name and code, so make sure you have both of those available. We will need a non-public school EANS contact, as well as a business contact. Oftentimes, many of us wear different hats. I know I often deal with a lot of money at the department, but I am not the business office, and I can't actually, they have unique needs and concerns. So we want to make sure that we do have a business contact, someone like a treasurer, someone who would have basically fiscal authority for your school, instead of perhaps a teacher who's been assigned EANS but doesn't actually have the authority locally to determine, to make some of these decisions. So making sure that you have the person who has control over the purse strings, for lack of a better term, in the room, involved in the conversation on EANS, and so that we have a contact available for them. We will also ask your overall enrollment and low income enrollment. We have both of those numbers already provided for you in the application or in your EANS allocations. So we have linked in the application to that PDF, and you'll pretty much copy and paste. If it says I have 30 overall enrollment, 20 low income, then on my application, I will put 30 for overall enrollment and 20 for low income. Changing those numbers in the application won't impact your allocation. We'll need to go through that through different means. So again, what we have on the application for you or on the allocation spreadsheet, please make sure those numbers are consistent and reported on your application. We'll also have the applicant certify to a number of our checkboxes that we have on EANS that we have to make sure we are asking you all. So that includes your nonprofit status, accredited non-public school. Essentially, we've already done that check on our end, but we have to make sure that that you promise that, as well to ensure that your school existed before March 13th, 2020. If your school was not in operation before March 13th, 2020, unfortunately, you would not be eligible for EANS. At least EANS 1, I would need to look ahead. So please do reach out if that is a concern to you as to whether you'd be eligible based on your date of when you were in operation. Again, schools can do either or on PPP and EANS 1. So any receipt of a PPP loan on or after 12/27, so December 27th of 2020, would make you, if you accepted PPP, that would make you ineligible for EANS. And then essentially that you will not apply for the same thing, essentially on or after 12/27. And some key points, so we are allowing, EANS allows for both reimbursement of prior allowable expenses back to March 13th, 2020. And it also allows for future activities. So we'll have both of those asked for you. We have the spreadsheets here that you can click on those. Those will open up the Excel spreadsheet that we're asking as our template for you to upload into your application. And it'll essentially go over what are you requesting reimbursement for, how many, what was the itemized price, and then a description. As a pro tip, I suppose, for your application, when you are filling out the description piece, try to ask yourself, what would Cole and Andrew need to know, and Brandon and Laura need to know in order to make sure this is reasonable and allowable? So please include as much detail as possible in terms of the individual cost so that we can get a good idea of what it's going to be used for to make sure it's allowable under EANS, and we have enough detail to know how much is being spent on it. You know, that would keep us from approving like a gold-plated iPad, for instance. That's sort of what we would need to know, just making sure that things are reasonable overall and that we're still meeting our general costs allowabilities with our funds. And so again, you can click both the spreadsheet for the past activities that you're seeking reimbursement for, and then new or future activities that you are seeking approval for. Those are separate spreadsheets because we will handle those a little bit differently on the accounting side. So just wanted to make you aware of that. All right.
Well, before you go on, can I speak on two things?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just want to talk about the vendors. So vendors are anyone that you're going to work with, that you're going to buy supplies from, equipment, whatever you think you're going to need. So for example, big business would be Walmart, Amazon, Target. I know a lot of you have discussed talking about local vendors because you can get things a little bit quicker. They do need to apply through the vendor process, which Cole is going to talk about. I do want to talk about Class Wallet, but some of you are bringing it up in the chat, is going to be like the financial manager, and we're going to do a separate webinar. We're still in the process of finalizing all of those parts. So don't worry about the reimbursement. How do we get our money? How fast everything works? We will be doing a separate webinar all based on that part of the process. Right now, we are just focusing on the application because we need to get those in the door. The second part I want to talk about, as I need to see as the chat is going, yes, this grant will be amendable. We are working on the amendable schedule right now. It'll work very similar to equitable services, but we're going to create kind of windows and timelines because if you're submitting a change to your application on the daily, there's no way we're going to be able to get to it. So we really have to work out that process as well. As Cole said, we're flying 3 planes and building them at the same time. This deadline for EANS has, I think, been the quickest timeline for any federal grant. So we're trying to think of everything proactively while also getting it to you as quickly as possible. So just bear with us. And then the last question is the past or present cutoff for reimbursements. This is Andy Hansen. We are also working that part out. We have some things in mind, but just bear with us. Back to you, Cole.
Yeah, I know Andrew and we talked this morning about that being an action item. We'll revisit exactly the reimbursement portion there. But I did want to make sure we have plenty of time to jump in and actually look at the application here. So let me see. Andrew, can you let me know? Can you see the application?
Yes,
Or
I
at least
can.
the page. Perfect. All right. So on this first one here, if we are going to
I would just log out.
all right. So if you are accessing the landing page, this is the landing page for our application for the first time. First off, just note, if you are a new user, then you will need to go ahead and click create a new account to complete the registration process and to create your logon credentials. You're likely not an existing user, but once you are, you'll be able to just save your credentials and then you can log on. So we will go ahead and pretend that we are creating a new account. So you'll go through here, pretend I am actually filling out each one of these, but again, you'll have your non-public school, the name of your school. Please try to make this the official name so that we are able to keep our naming conventions consistent and so that we're identifying the right school. There may be a lot of similar names out there, so we just want to make sure we are specific. Your EIN or your tax ID number, your non-public school number. So again, your code, it would be C123, A240. If you have any questions about that, please visit InView and you can search for your school name. The school website as well. Contact information that includes phone number, EANS administrator email, the address for the school. Let me see here. We will have these things validated, and it'll go through each one of these steps. Andrew, did you wanted me to actually go through these here?
Yes, if we have time. I think this will be the core part because the application they're able to see. As Cole is filling this out, I just want to talk about, I have been going in for those. I think we have 101 non-public schools registered. You're called organizations in this system. I have had to go in and update several of the addresses for your school. So please, this just goes back to my request to please take your time. Do not use autofill. Do not use auto-populate. For example, I saw one profile where the address, the city, the state, and the postcode were all IN. So it just lets me know that you guys are really rushing through this. I know you're excited. I know you want to get it handled, but it just makes the process even harder to do. So please take your time. But just so you know, if you did do that, or maybe you didn't fill out your full non-public school name, I have been trying to go in and edit. I do believe the actual organization page, you're unable to edit, but I can do that. But when it comes to your actual application and your profile as a user, you do get to make edits to that. And as you can see, the system we're using is very finicky, but it's good because it ensures you just have to use the hyphens, Cole.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just gonna point that out that if you've noticed, both on the tax ID number, website, email, etc., we have the system trying to built in so that it will catch any possible errors. So just making sure that you are entering your numbers with the correct formats that they are hoping for here. Otherwise, the system will block you from being able to proceed. We'll just copy the information from the other one. So it's yelling at me because I have a duplicate login. So that'll be something that will be another check on you all to make sure you don't have your email address assigned to another user. This lets me pass through here. We'll ask here, are you the sole EANS administrator working on this profile? If no, you'll be prompted to create another profile. So if you click yes, it will stop there. If you click no, this is where you can add in if there's another staff person. I would enter Andrew, of course, here. I know we gave him a different email, but
And Cole, when you're done here, I do want you to go back so I can explain something too.
okay.
As he's filling out, Matt, I also answered this in the chat. We're looking into multiple applications with the application creator, but it looks, if you have a non-public school code, we are asking that you do replicate this process for each non-public school code. The reason is that for budgeting and reporting and maintenance of effort and everything that comes after this that we are going to have to report, we're going to have to be able to do it non-public school by non-public school, and that code allows us to do that. Additionally, when you get to the class wallet side, they also need to know those things, because as you may or may not know, there are about 5 to 10 different St. John Evangelists, 5 to 10 different St. Joseph. So that non-public school code really gives you that unique identifier. So yes, I know it's a pain in the butt, but you do have to fill this out for each non-public school code that you have. So just going back to the application, if you do hit yes up there and you hit next, this is something we caught, and I just want to explain. When you hit you are the sole person, this says additional EANS administrator. It should not say that, but what it's doing is our creator said it's just having you fill out the remaining boxes that you didn't fill out in the user information. We tried to have it removed, but it would mess up the already registered schools. So if you hit yes, don't worry. As you can see, these are not 2 required fields, so you can just hit next, and it'll take you on to confirming a password. Thanks, Cole.
And so then you'll type in your password, confirm your password. Please do save your password somewhere safe. Just make sure you have that readily available. And then you will click on Create Account. We are not going to do that today because we already have an account, of course. And I believe that brings us to playing in the actual application here. So I'm going to search just a random user that we have. These are all controls and screens that you all do not necessarily have access to. Janet, I'm going to be your proxy today, just so we can see the application preview here. So as you notice, this will be your welcome screen. Welcome to the Indiana EANS application. So we just put notes in here that it's preview as of the 26th. And then just reiterating what I mentioned earlier, that any information entered in before it's actually open on the 5th won't be saved. We've also linked you to more information on the EANS program if you have that. Without further ado, let's preview the application. So the EANS application, I know we've sent out drafts earlier. It's largely based off of the template that the U.S. Department of Education provided. It is not too terribly in-depth. It's fairly straightforward. We hope very accessible to everybody. So again, the non-public school name, most of this is self-explanatory. If you have not before known what your non-public school code is, or if you don't know now, I referenced InView earlier. You may click InView and that will take you to a place where you can search for your school name, and that will give you the school number. Again, for non-public schools in Indiana, they all start with an alphabetical letter and then 3 numerals after that. This is helpful for us to know if you are part of an overarching network of schools such as an archdiocese or the Lutheran schools, etc. So please do note that. That helps us just make sure we're coordinating with all the parties involved. We are also hoping to know which school district you are geographically located in. So if you could please indicate which LEA or school district you are geographically bound to or within their boundaries of. Please do type that in here. We have questions about PPP prior to December 27th, 2020. So remember, on or after this date makes you ineligible, but we are asking about information from prior PPP loans, essentially to make sure that funds aren't being used to sort of double dip and pay for the same sort of activities. Many schools may have received equitable share as part of CARES 1.0 or the CARES Act funds or ESSER 1. So if you did receive an equitable share portion, please do indicate yes here. The next group of questions is about the business office contact. It's asking if you will also function as a business manager or chief financial officer of the EANS application for your non-public school. Contact name for that individual. Just trying to be mindful of time here as well. So probably I won't read things out to you because you can all read, and we will keep this on task here. So these are, again, our eligibility requirements. We're essentially asking you to self-screen for eligibility to make sure that you meet each one of these points. You will please click yes. If it clicks no, please reach out to the department. We'll need to have a more in-depth conversation about your eligibility. Here's where we are required to ask questions about enrollment and poverty numbers for your school or low-income students. So here's where, as I mentioned, you will go to the link where we have created an allocation for you. You'll see if I'm A260 here, I have 30 listed as my overall enrollment. 26 of them are low income. So then on my application, I'm going to be sure to put overall enrollment was 30. Low income students were 26. And it's been kind and letting me know that it's preview mode and won't be saved. Then here we'll do a percentage. So the number of your students who are low income, please be sure to put that in as a decimal for the system. So it won't read 14, please put in 0.14.
Cool, can I jump in here?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just want to point out that when we designed this, we tried to keep consistency between the PDF. So we may say total enrollment, it just means overall enrollment, which you will see in the PDF says overall enrollment. We say low income students. We also talk about poverty counts. You will see in the PDF it's called low income, so trying to keep it the same. We are also aware some people are talking in the chat privately, but also sending in the group. Numbers may seem off, above, below, not matching. Please do not input numbers that are not on the spreadsheet. If you do that, we are going to bounce the application right back to you and have you change those numbers to please match the PDF, which we have linked into the document to use. Fully knowing that there are several schools in this list who have already accepted PPP, so they are ineligible. So we know there are schools that are not going to be able to apply for this funding. The application is closing hard deadline on May 17th because what we need to do is look and see what schools have applied. Remember, it's going to be in a conditional approval or a fully approval. There's no deny here. We're not denying anyone money unless you really are putting unallowable activities for everything you list in the application. So then after that close date, Cole and the team, we're going to have to look at what money is remaining, and then it has to get distributed to those schools that did apply and do have an application. So we fully know that there is more money going to be given to you. So if your planning allocation doesn't match what you think it should, there is more money on the way. And just thinking even more so, there is even more money on the way with EANS 2, which we're going to briefly talk about at the end of this. So please, I'm saying please, please, please use the numbers that we have provided for you, knowing that there is more. I already know 3 schools for sure cannot apply for EANS. So that money has to be redistributed. So please, please, please use the numbers from the PDF when filling out the application. Thank you, Cole.
Yeah, and Indiana is, we're ahead of the game on that one. A lot of states are having to make allocations, estimates, collect enrollment and everything on the fly. This will keep it really much more streamlined for us because we have to give out a minimum amount of money to schools or make that available to schools. So we want to make sure that we are meeting our statutory requirements. So your numbers likely will be adjusting. Those were just sort of planning, and we'll still need to issue final at some point, and we'll coordinate with that with an amendment period, much like schools do for public school districts would do for their title grants. So TBD, more on that is forthcoming. We're also required to ask about the impact of COVID on your school. So we have a short narrative here where school districts, our schools, non-public schools, can list sort of the challenges that have been presented by COVID, how it has negatively impacted your students. And so this is your place here to include that. I believe the limit is 250 words for this section. All right. So we have again here a reminder of the word for word allowable costs. And then again, word for word, the costs that are not allowable for reimbursement. Really quickly, if anybody's new to this, all of these activities are allowable, but not all these activities are reimbursable. So all of these activities down here are things that you can do that are new, but you wouldn't be able to request prior reimbursement for them. Clear as mud, I know. If you have other questions, please visit the EANS website. So these are things that may be allowable, but you're not able to request reimbursement. For instance, if you were to have gotten an HVAC system, we can't reimburse that unless it were something like a portable air purifier. So things along those lines. Again, if you need additional information on what would be allowable, please see the FAQ, which we've linked to here. This is where we have the request for prior reimbursement. So if you click this blue link, that will bring up the attachment for past activities. And again, this is where you'll be able to come in here and list those out. We have some examples provided both here and in the new activities spreadsheet. We have, please save it as your non-public school code and prior. So A002 prior, and then you will save that request for prior reimbursement. And you will upload it here where it says upload file, and then you will click and upload your prior reimbursement request. The same is new. Is the true for the new services. So again, you'll click on the blue link for a new services request template that will pop up. You'll fill that in. We have examples there as well. Again, provide as much detail as you can there for us to get a good idea of whether it is allowable, reasonable, and doable with EANS. And same thing, you will call it A002 new and upload that file. And please do enter the total amount requested either for new activities or for reimbursed activities. We have also included a link here at the bottom for anyone who has a vendor that you're going to work with and you want them to go ahead and start getting a jump on this process. We have linked here and we'll also go over the vendor registration website shortly. And the last piece is the certification or your assurances essentially. By signing below, you're affirming that all the following is true. So those are our assurances. And we have some information here just in terms of the PPP loan, control of funds, etc. And then your signature date, and that will serve as your signature. So this typing it in, typing your name will signify your actual signature. And then from there, you will submit and your application will have been done. And then that will be a to-do item for Andrew and the team and I. And we will then begin the 30-day clock to review your application and provide any feedback.
Well, before you click out of proxy, did you get a chance to show them how to edit their profile? Like the
I did not.
Okay. I just had a few questions about if you go to the top right-hand corner where it says Janet's name and you click edit I was gonna say click edit profile.
One second, we'll go back.
So as he's doing that, I'm getting some question about vendors right now. Nicole's going to talk about this next. We were able to make the vendor application, which is a JOT form, available yesterday. He's going to walk you through the process so you can send that to your vendors. The way we're hoping for it to work is once our team approves a vendor, we're going to have a live document that lists the vendors that have been approved. So maybe you can reach out to them if you're looking for vendors. When it comes to big business, such as Apple, Target, Walmart, we are still finalizing the last minute details on those. Because we are fully aware that it might be hard to reach out to Tim Cook and say, hey, Tim Cook, will you make sure you're in SAM.gov? Your services are secular, neutral, non-ideological. You're independent of the non-public school, so on and so forth. So that is coming. We understand a lot is moving. There are a lot of moving parts, but we're hoping to get that going in the next few days.
So if you need to edit your profile, this is where you will go up here to the top right corner to your control center. You'll click edit my profile, and then that is where you'll be able to go in and enter any information. Okay.
I also want to point out, as Cole was talking and we went through those 2 Excel documents, they're kind of color coded a little differently. If you are having issues finding them within the application, I have also put them on the EANS webpage. Both Excel files are there for you. Please, I'm asking again to take your time and to also save as we have asked you to save them, which is your non-public school code and either the word prior or new. It just is going to help in the long run. And as I will let Cole talk about vendors.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so I know we're coming up on the end of our time here. So this hopefully does not apply to anyone in the room because you can't be a vendor and a non-public school providing services to yourself. But this will be the application for any partnerships, any partner vendors that you're hoping to work with for them to be able to participate in the EANS program. So again, we'll start with the name of the individuals, etc., some of their contact information. Sorry, I'm showing the wrong thing.
You can go to the PowerPoint and there should be a link there.
Here we go. This makes more sense. Here's the vendor registration. Sorry, that was our template for the application. So we give some information in terms of the boxes that we have to check for the vendors. We collect their vendor information. We're also asking them to list any schools that they're working with. That way we can kind of preempt and know, okay, this school is likely going to be identifying that they want to work with Cole's HVAC system for only a portable air purifier, of course. We will need to verify that they are not on the federal disbarred vendor list. So we need to make sure that they are not barred from working on federal projects. We've given them instructions to verify if they have been disbarred or not, and they will upload proof. Also, we have given a spot for them to upload proof that they are registered with the Indiana Secretary of State's office. These are all boxes that we have to check on the vendor registration side to make sure we are doing okay in terms of procurement. We're also asking any prior school district partnerships. So I would sort of enlist you all in the communications help on this. If your vendor that you're wanting to work with, you know you've worked with them on, say, equitable share projects and they've worked with your local school district, the school district likely has already screened them for a lot of this information. So we may say, upload some information as that. It doesn't replace any of the boxes that we have to check above, but it would help us show that they've already proven that they are secular, non-ideological, et cetera, to someone else, to another public agent. And so we can use that as part of our supplementary documentation. And then the last part is essentially assuring that they are, to the best of their knowledge, it's truthful, that they're not disbarred. Any services that they provide have to be secular, non-ideological, and neutral. They can be like a religious organization, but the services that we're paying for with EANS must be secular. So I want to make sure we're clear about that the organization itself does not have to be, but the activities must be secular, non-ideological, and neutral. The applicant cannot be a non-public school, so it has to be independent and not affiliated with a non-public school. So essentially, Cole's non-pub could not set up Cole's non-pub arm as a vendor and then essentially pay the non-public school through a loophole in the background. So please make sure that the vendors are not affiliated with any non-public school. And finally, the applicant, so the vendor would know that if they performed any work that wasn't allowable under EANS and wasn't ultimately approved by IDOE, that they are liable for not being paid for that work. A signature and the date, and that is essentially the vendor application. So keeping that also, like I said, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We've linked to that in all of our guidance documents as well as in the application. So feel free to send that out to your vendor partners.
I also want to add about the vendor partner thing. I'm getting the question repeated. Right now, any vendor has not been approved for EANS funding. So if you've already used them and you're looking for past reimbursement, they still have to apply. If you're looking to use them in the future, they still have to apply. Currently, any vendor has not been approved for EANS funding. So you will need to have past, present, and future vendors apply through this process in order to become eligible to receive that funding.
So these were just some pre-application to-dos for the vendors. We want to make this available to you all. Again, these are the exact same requirements we just went over in the vendor application, so I won't go over them again. But SAM.gov, Secretary of State, and their assurances. Okay, we have about 7 minutes left. Andrew, is there anything from the chat that we haven't responded to yet that we need to? Are there any outstanding questions out there?
I do. If John Laughlin is able to unmute himself, he does have a question, and I just want him to add clarity because I'm lost by it and I don't want to misspeak on it, but it's about supporting documentation. So John, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question. Maybe he might not. So I'm going to try and find his question. Here it is. There's mention of supporting documents for assurances. Do they need to be uploaded? And I asked to clarify. And he said supporting documentation for assurances that the school agrees to. I'm assuming it's on the non-pub app, or is it the vendor app? I'm waiting to see. His microphone doesn't work. Okay. John, if you'll just send us an email, like non-public application. Cole, do you remember asking for supporting documentation?
So we don't ask for supporting documentation. I think it's a good idea to always maintain that. That you are indeed, in terms of being accredited, we've already checked that. That is essentially you promising that all those things are true. So I would maintain locally, what proof do you have that you are accredited? That'd be fairly easy to print off your accreditation status. The documentation, I need to look at the exact assurances. So nonprofit status, that is fairly easy to prove as well on the IRS website. The receipt of PPP, that also is sort of just a promise on this document, this legal document here, that essentially you were assuring that you did not accept PPP on or after December 27th. So I would just maintain documentation in terms of how you could save that. The lack of documentation that you received PPP would be a good indicator. So just signing off, having a treasury report or a report of your accounts that you did not receive any PPP paperwork, or that your application was denied, anything of that sort from PPP.
Just talking more about the vendor, yes, if they're on SAM.gov, if they're registered with the state, if they can claim that their services meet all of the requirements, they still have to apply for an EANS vendor application, which is the JOT form. So even if you were able to look them up on SAM.gov and see that they meet the requirements, the vendor still has to apply to us. And I had someone ask, well, what happens if we're asking for reimbursement? Isn't the non-public school getting the money? Yes, however, but as the SAE per federal requirements, we have to ensure that the money was used for an allowable activity. So this all goes back to making sure that we are not breaking the law and making sure that a vendor you used in the past is registered with both the state of Indiana and SAM.gov, that their services were secular, neutral, non-ideological, they were independent of your school, and they are not a non-pub themselves. We have to do that for every single vendor, may it be prior, present, or future. Jay. So I'm trying to see, Cole, if there's anything else there. Like I said before about big business, we will make sure to include something about the Amazon purchases as well as a Target, Home Depot, so on and so forth. Cole, are you looking at the chat too? If not, it's okay. I'm just trying to see a lot of starting to fly in. Oh, one question about the budget I wanted to ask. Do we have to budget the full amount? We are going to ask that you try and get as close as possible to the full pre-planning or the planning allocation. We understand that this is a lot of funding and it might be hard to spend, but if you do have $100,000 and you only budget for $1,000, we are probably going to send that back to you and ask you to think a little bit more about your application, because we want you to try and use this money as quickly as possible.
So 2 questions here. Thomas asked, has the state fiscal agent been identified? Yes. We'll be working with Class Wallet and then the Southern Indiana Education Service Center, SIEC. Those are our public fiscal agents. Update on EANS 2.0. You know what I know at this point. There was very little given to EANS in the law, so I'm waiting on guidance from the U.S. Department of Education in terms of how to roll that out. But it's pretty straightforward. This is Cole thinking out loud and talking out loud. It's likely going to be a second bucket of money, roughly as large as our first for EANS 1. Pretty much identical, except no reimbursement of past expenses, only new activities. That's about what we know in terms of EANS. PPP, I do not believe is not part of EANS, so it isn't a part of the eligibility requirements. I saw here, okay, I understand the deadline for application is May 17th. How long are the funds amount or approved amounts used for? So the encumbrance deadline, or your finish line that you'll want to think of for EANS, is this September 30th, 2023. So all activities, any work that's done by a staff member, by a contractor, any contracts that are signed for any work or anything of that sort, all the activities have to have happened. Any professional development or training will have had to happen by September 30th, 2023. I believe EANS 2 will be another year on top of that, so likely until September 30th, 2024. That's EANS 2, which will be a separate bucket of money. EANS 1 you can use until September 30th, 2023. When funds will be distributed, that will be the application, and then funds won't actually be distributed. It'll be after the activity has occurred. The activity will be, request for payment will come up, as long as there's sort of an invoice or proof that the activity has happened, then Department of Education will clear that for payment. So it should be fairly quick in terms of when vendors would be paid for the work that they've been done. So for reasonable transportation, I might direct you back to the EANS guidance, because I know we're pretty much out of time here. We have sent some guidelines on transportation. No buses would be allowable, but if you needed to, for instance, have a contracted service for an additional bus route or something along those lines, that would be allowable as long as it's reasonable. Essentially, we're not buying a fleet of Ferraris to transport students. That would be the reasonable transportation cost piece there.
I also want to add, please do not budget over the allocation that is listed on the PDF. If you do so, we will immediately send it back and say, please make an adjustment. I know I did mention that more funding is coming, but like I said, please budget up to what your planning allocation is listed in the PDF. We know that goes back to the amendment window. Typically, the way federal grants work is that you get a planning allocation, you do what you need to do, and then you get a final allocation. An amendment is open so you can make adjustments to your budget. We're treating EANS very similar to that process. I'm sure if you've worked with equitable services, your LEA should be reaching back out to you with budget. So this is going to be an example where the team is going to say, hey, we were able to recalculate, you're going to get an additional blah, or you're going to get this amount of money. We're going to ask that you will open up your application and move forward from there. So please use the number on the PDF. Our team will be using that PDF when approving these applications, making sure that one, overall enrollment, low income counts, and the planning allocation match up. If they don't, we will automatically stop and send the application back to you to make those changes. Mark Top, this is a great question. You just caught my eye. Prometheum smart boards, even though do take construction, they are an allowable cost. You can talk to the feds, ask your questions to them of why that's allowable, but something isn't. But yes, smart boards and Prometheum boards are allowable because they can be anchored to a wall and taken off pretty easily, or they can be put onto a rolling cart, is how I taught on a few of them. So yes, Prometheum smart boards are allowable under educational technology, which is number 9. So great question.
And for consistency, those don't necessarily require
There you go.
construction or renovation of a space. Therefore, they're allowable. They're not necessarily like you can't carry them with you necessarily. You need a cart or something, but those don't require they're not a permanent fixture.
Go on, Cole.
No, I mean, I think that's it. I know we have hit our time, and I want to be respectful of that. So I was going to turn it over to John and Heidi if they had anything else to add. Everybody else, thank you very much again for your grace and patience. It's always interesting to start a new program from scratch. Even more interesting when we're given a tight timeline on that. I hope we've done the right thing. We will see in a couple months if we did. I know that may not instill a lot of hope or inspiration, but I think we've given something that will give a maximum amount of flexibility for schools to help meet the needs of kids after this pandemic. So thank you everybody for the work that you're doing. You're all on the front lines and we appreciate that. Thank you for your support.
Thanks,
please reach out
Cole.
with any questions.
Appreciate it, Cole. Thanks, Andrew. To think about being in their shoes and someone says you have $82 million, figure out what to do with it and make sure it follows all the regulations that the feds put out. So it is a huge undertaking that they have taken on and have done it with grace and have been very collaborative and cooperative, I know, from my perspective, and enjoy working with them and will continue to work with them through EANS 1 and EANS 2. Greatly appreciate their support of providing emergency assistance to our non-public schools here in the state. And if you're interested in an encore performance of Cole or Andrew, they're back again at 4 o'clock today. You just have to re-register if you want to come back and hear it all again or to ask more questions. So we'll be here at 4 o'clock again. Thanks for being here. And we'll be back with another webinar as we get into the requisition process, as Andrew alluded to earlier. So thanks for being with us, folks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.